This is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and welcome to 2019 with this episode of Legislative Update. With me today is State Senator Julian and State Representative Sarah Peake. Welcome.
Happy New Year.
Happy to see you. So we are off to a new start, and first I want to congratulate both of you. You were just sworn in recently.
Right.
Thank you.
So how is everything up in State House land?
Everything is great. We were both sworn in on Wednesday. Me for my 7th term, which I can hardly believe.
Wow.
And Julian for his second
my
term.
second.
And, I'm just going to brag on him for a minute. He had a very big day up there. He was asked by the Senate President to be one of the 2 people who nominated her. So, Julian, this is like a big deal. It means
Thank you,
things are
Sarah.
happening.
Yeah, no, I mean,
What does that mean?
so in sort of the pomp and circumstance that we have in when we convene, right? We're all sworn in by the governor, and then we sort of do the formal processes of electing the Senate President. And that's sort of been established sort of beforehand. But 2 of the sort of Senate President's closest supporters are asked to give nominating speeches as to why, in this case, Karen Spilka, who's our wonderful Senate President, why we're supporting her, why we believe she should be our Senate President. And so I was one of those 2 members who was asked to do that, which is a pretty significant honor, especially for I'm now a sophomore legislator, a second-term legislator. We've had a lot of transition in the Senate, a lot of new members. Actually, there are 10 members who've come in since I joined the Senate. Was sworn in 2 years ago in 2017.
25%.
Yeah, so there's a significant amount of turnover. It does mean, though, for someone in my position, I'm one of the more seasoned members at this point. And so there's a lot of opportunity in the Senate, and then having wonderful colleagues in the House, having Sarah's position in leadership in the House, the rest of the Cape delegation. I think we're well positioned, but it was a tremendous honor to be asked by the Senate President to give her nomination, to give a nomination speech. So thank you, Sarah, for letting me brag.
So I know that there's a lot of things coming up on the agenda. One that I've heard mention of that I want to talk about first, because it's something a little new and different, is some of the environmental initiatives. And I understand Audubon's involved in some of them.
Right. So this is the time of year now. We have until, I think it's the 3rd Friday in January, is our bill filing deadline. So for bills to be seasonably filed, which means they automatically get a hearing and at least move through the initial steps along the legislative pipeline, we have to meet that deadline. So now is the time that Julian and I are meeting on Wednesday. I'm meeting with colleagues on the House side and with various advocates. So I reached out to the Nature Conservancy in Mass Audubon, and there's a bill that we're working on. We have it almost drafted now. It has to do with carbon sequestration.
Well, there's a mouthful.
Isn't that a fancy name? So basically, in layman's terms, what that means is through plant life, trees, older trees absorb and eat more carbon out of the atmosphere than newer trees. So if you go and clear cut an old forest and you plant 3 new trees for every one you cut down, you're still not making up for that loss of carbon eating that those older trees could perform. Our bays and estuaries, there are hundreds of years of carbon that is locked in the soil there. If they start to degrade, that carbon is released into the atmosphere. So this is both something of interest to coastal legislators as well as legislators, particularly from the western part of Massachusetts. The bill proposes certainly to preserve, but also to increase our ability through natural means to sequester carbon, take carbon out of the atmosphere. Right now, about 15 to 18% of the carbon that is produced in Massachusetts, about 15% is taken out of the atmosphere through these natural causes. So we want to see that percentage increase. We'll offer incentives to local communities to adopt certain best practices. There may be a little bit of kind of some zoning reform that goes along with this. And we also establish a commission under the governor's office to study and make recommendations, either statutory or regulatory recommendations to the legislature as ways to achieve the goals that the bill sets up. But it's great fun to work with Mass Audubon. Of course, we have the Wellfleet Bay Sanctuary right here down the road. Jack Clark, who's the legislative agent for Audubon for years when he was in college and even in high school, worked as a lifeguard for the Cape Cod National Seashore right here on the back beach. And the other exciting part about it is the other member of the House who is most interested in this legislation is Representative Brad Jones, and he is the long-serving and long-standing minority leader in the House. So he is the top Republican. So he and I are going to partner on this as lead co-sponsors. So what's great is when it comes to taking action around climate change, this isn't a Democratic or a Republican issue. It's an issue that Democrats and Republicans both care deeply about.
That's one thing that I think we've talked about before that always strikes me here is I'm very proud of here in the Commonwealth that we can argue and debate things, but we figured out ways to work together for things that are going to impact everybody. And it seems like another example of the way we stay functional.
Yeah, and this is a terrific bill in the sense that, climate change is such an existential threat to those of us who make a life here on Cape Cod. Folks will latch on to, this priority or that priority, or we need to do this or that, but this really gives us, it's a whole set of tools we need to be exploring, right? Everything from how do you make our communities more efficient, the far offshore wind farms that we have coming on. This carbon sequestration really gives our communities another tool. And so that's how we've really been trying to focus on this because the issue is so big. And we've got to find all the ways throughout how we make our lives here, everything across how we make our lives here. How do we find ways to be resilient? How do we reduce carbon output? How do we sequester it? I think it's just terrific. I'm excited to co-sponsor the bill.
So there's no silver bullet that's going to let little old Massachusetts all by itself solve the global issue of climate change. But we can certainly take steps to improve things here. My bill would just be one of those steps. Actually, Massachusetts has just entered into an agreement with, I believe it's 8 other states, and the number of states is growing to get to zero carbon emissions in public transit over the course of a period of years. That will probably be the most impactful thing that we can do. And at the same time that we're making a renewed commitment to public transportation, including the T gets all the spotlight and everything, but we're doing some pretty good things here on Cape Cod and statewide to improve public transit for those communities like ours that are served by regional transit authorities also.
That's exciting. Yeah. Well, I know it's a little sidestep. It kind of touches our environment, and we've talked about it before, and that is the Pilgrim issue. I know that's back on the agenda again. I know that clock is ticking to shut down. What's coming up this session?
So the good news is, this plant is closing, right? This is something that community leaders and activists have been pushing, begging for. We as a delegation have been very concerned. The lights go off, the end of May 2019, which is crucial. This is a really critical point in how Pilgrim is closed and then decommissioned. And so the traditional bills that we filed around holding accountability for Pilgrim, we're taking a look at, all right, what do we need to keep trying to push? What's no longer as sort of salient, given that they're not generating electricity? What are new pieces that are in there? So making sure that we have a prompt decommissioning, that we're moving the most sort of high-risk piece of that plant is the spent fuel pool, which is 6 stories up. How do you move that into dry cask storage? There's been some good victories, actually. The pad where the spent fuel is going to be put, actually, through negotiations is now, initially it was going to be pretty close to the plant, only maybe 10 feet above sea level. Now it's going over 20 feet above sea level, further up the hill. So that's what we're taking a look at. All right, how do we make sure that as a Commonwealth, we're holding Entergy, likely this company Holtec that is now going to purchase the plant. How do we hold them accountable, and how do we incentivize and make sure that plant is decommissioned as swiftly as possible, safely as possible, to really protect our communities and to really, ultimately eliminate one of the biggest threats that our communities have been facing for decades.
Right. Yeah, just because the switch gets flipped at the end of May doesn't mean it's the end of the story. So, the senator and I have had to kind of, we're refocusing our attention and kind of taking a lot of our old legislation and putting it in the dustbin, because now we're looking at future state, how we can best support the Decommissioning Commission. And really the bottom line is how to make sure that Massachusetts continues to have a seat at the table and isn't just pushed aside after the plant shuts down, because there's still a very real and very important role for the Department of Public Health, for emergency management, and for public safety having to do with that. And of course, how long will that site be a nuclear waste dump, and how safe can we make that during the time that waste is stored there?
Well, that's that push and pull. The NRC is a federal agency,
That's
so
right.
there's only so much we can do. But it physically is right here,
Yeah.
and anything that happens there impacts not the NRC but us.
Sure.
So that's great to hear. That is discussions are continuing. Another perennial that I know is back on the table again is healthcare.
Yeah.
Right.
So you guys give me a little update of what's going to happen with healthcare.
Yeah, so just to turn back the clock a little bit, what happened with healthcare already is the Senate did a comprehensive healthcare insurance reform bill, healthcare reform bill. The House did a comprehensive healthcare reform bill. Conference committees were appointed. They met regularly. They got very close. Conference committee negotiations are confidential, so I don't know what the sticking points were. But midnight of July 31st, the last minute of our formal sessions, came and went, and we didn't have agreement between the House conferees and the Senate conferees. So I expect that we're going to see a comprehensive health care bill come out of the hopper pretty early on in the session, because 99% of the work has been done. And, increased access, mental health parity, continuing to address the opioid crisis. And Julian was able to get a wonderful piece in the Senate section for a study commission to study the costs and viability of a single payer system. So I don't want to talk about your...
No, but I think there's sort of three pieces here. One, there's all this low-hanging fruit, which is common sense things that Massachusetts hasn't kept up with. Telemedicine, looking at requirements actually for EMTs and how many EMTs do you need in an ambulance. This is a big issue for our communities, which are, Provincetown, Truro, Wellesley, Eastham, furthest from an emergency department of any town in the state.
Yes.
Right? So this guys, So this common sense piece. The second piece, right, is the cost, which is just continues to, whoever is paying, whether it be the Commonwealth, whether it be employers, whether it be families, the cost just continues to be such a burden. And then there's this piece of just, that we have this broken sick care system. There's got to be a better way for us to do what almost every other developed country does in the world. And so the bill that I filed that we passed in the Senate, we actually passed it in a bipartisan vote of 33-3. Republicans voted for this, so it was great. It's a benchmark study. So it says, look, we're mandating that the state has to study what it would cost for a single payer system over 3 years. And then if the costs of that system are actually less than the current system we have, they have to then present a plan to us on how do we move forward in a path towards single payer. I'm a single payer supporter, but I think anyone who tells you this is something we can do overnight just doesn't understand how profoundly complex our system is. So I think that's something, we got broad support in the Senate. I think there's going to be a lot of support from the House, a lot of exciting new members, a lot of new women in the House.
That's right. That's right. So that's going to be good. So I'll pick it up on the House side, and this is all part of the strategy. It's like, one of us gets a good idea, and the other one can take that over to the Senate, and Julian gets a great idea, I take that over to the House. And I think by my filing it in the House side this time around, it will increase the ability for it either to be in the House bill or stick, if the Senate puts it and stick through the conference committee, because we'll be able to start to have a conversation and get an upswelling of support for it.
Well, to me, it seems it's important, especially getting data, because you can talk about A or B.
That's right.
But if you have no data, you're just talking an opinion, which is very good and interesting. But to implement it, you need to understand what the impact will be. And
and there's nothing
could surprise
more
you that we don't know
healthcare,
how it's going to come out.
That's right. And once you have data, you can start to draw the pathway.
Yeah.
But without the data and information, especially in something, as you said, as complex as healthcare, it's all just talk. So we want to get beyond the talking.
Yep. Well, the one last topic, I know we're almost at time, but the other perennial topic that comes up is housing.
Yeah, housing and housing production and zoning reform is just something that is so critically needed here on the Cape. Sarah's been leading on this. But also across the Commonwealth, we've not really kept up with housing production. There was a whole series of bills. Actually, Sarah filed one of the bills last session that were in conversation. The governor had a bill that basically sort of took a lot of low-hanging fruit and sort of ideas that no one objected to. But we weren't able to get that done either. So I think coming back this session, there's going to be a real push for us to do a meaningful housing production bill. Our concern always is, all right, often this policy is focused around Greater Boston, right? And the challenge you have of basically, all these sort of suburbs around Boston haven't really been keeping up with housing production. That's a big problem for the Commonwealth, but we've also got a problem here that's more unique around seasonal communities. So we're working on a bill in my office right now around taking policies that would really help housing production in our seasonal communities and to sort of have a seasonal communities housing bill. So looking at that, I think what's also really important to remind viewers is that this isn't just something we can do at the state level. So zoning reform is needed. We need more incentives for housing production. But these decisions are made, before the planning board, the zoning board of
zoning board,
appeals,
right.
at town meeting.
Yeah.
There's continued efforts around accessory dwelling units, which is good. In some towns in Truro, I think they're actually going to be talking about taking some of this expanded local room occupancy money that's going to be coming from the state, because we passed the short-term room occupancy bill, taking a portion of that to dedicate that to housing.
Yep.
So there's a whole host of stuff we need to keep up and be doing on housing. I should add the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, which is going to bring about $1 billion to the region over the next few decades to build out and to actually bring the wastewater infrastructure we need and we're required to have. That's probably the biggest thing that Sarah and I can do on housing here.
Well, that's a huge thing, and I don't want to. It's much more than we can cover here. So we'd love to come together and do a special conversation just on that. You guys willing?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
That would be terrific. 'Cause it is. People have a lot of questions about it. It's real. It's happening, and it's very complex.
Right.
So we're going to coming back to that one.
Right. Good.
Anything else that I didn't mention that we're looking ahead for the 2019 that is going to be coming up?
A couple little things, not so little, things that I'm working on. I was appointed in the late summer to the Regional Transit Authority statewide task force. So we're looking at best practices and ways to drive more money to our regional transit authorities. I actually have a bill that will allow us to count passenger ferry ridership, to use that as numbers in order to be able to leverage and access more federal transportation monies to come to the RTA right here on the Cape and the islands.
Terrific.
So we're hoping to get that bill moving. Of course, I continue to sit on the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, being the legislative commissioner there. And kind of to my surprise, I was appointed to the statewide commission on shellfishing and aquaculture. So I'm thrilled,
Yes.
but I kind of found out that I was appointed when I got an email inviting me to a meeting. It's like, oh, okay.
It just had its first meeting.
It just
I
had
heard.
its
Yeah.
first meeting. Unfortunately, it was the day that we were sworn in to the legislature, so I couldn't attend that meeting. But they've promised to try not to have it conflict with the House schedule.
And Teresa,
after that.
this is the period where we're working on legislation.
Yeah.
So if you've got an idea or an issue,
Right.
that merits legislation, reach out to our offices now.
How do you do that?
So
Let people know how you
just
do that.
You call our offices or you email us, and
What's
we
the
can
best email? Give
The
the
best
email.
email. It's julian.cyr@masenate.gov.
Yeah, and mine is sarah.peake@mahouse.gov. And if you go to malegislature.gov, you can search all senators and all reps and our phone numbers and our email addresses.
all there.
So we're in the
that's-
sweet spot for feedback right
Yeah,
now.
especially before January 18th, which is the bill filing deadline.
Okay.
So we can work on things after that, but this is exactly like you said, the sweet
All right,
spot.
so the time is
so reach
now.
out. Yeah,
That's right.
Well, great. Well, on that note, we are almost out of time. So I want to say thank you again for being here and kicking off 2019 with us here. And I look forward to coming back and having this conversation again. Once again, this is Teresa Martin with Lower Cape TV. And with me today on Legislative Update has been State Senator Julian Cyr and State Representative Sarah Peake. Thank you guys very much and Happy New Year.
And happy
Happy
New
New
Year
Year.
to you and,
Thank you,
and to your
Teresa.
viewers.